Hello and welcome to the CGC show. My name is Simon Powis, and we are actually down to the fourth last episode for the whole season. We have this Thursday, we have an interview. Next Tuesday will be the last teaching, and then next Thursday will be the very last interview session where I think we'll have the CGC team on to talk about some of the exams that have been going on. So we are getting close to winding up this season, but it's been such a great time. And, I was reflecting just a little earlier. I had the pleasure of talking with the team, with Dave and Nikki and also James Erickson earlier this morning. The only team member they were missing was Sanya Plochel. But I feel so grateful to be working with kind people, hardworking people, people with integrity. We spent time this morning talking about making sure that we are trying to make the best decisions that serve them, talking about where they are in their playing, their exams. A lot of thought and care goes in on behalf that the team really gives a lot of thought and care to all of the people we're grateful to work with. And it just was a moment I felt very grateful for, to be working with people that I like very much, and that also espouse such wonderful virtues. So just a little bit of a hit you right in the feels moment this morning. It was great. So wonderful to see everybody. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I see Mr. Gary Lee is there, and I know James Erickson's in there, and Dave is in there. I'm not sure if Nikki is in there, but a lot of the CGC family is in there. Mr. Roger Ramirez, podcaster extraordinaire. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Today is going to be a Q&A session. So it may be an easy session for me in that I don't have much prepared. However, it may get very difficult given the who knows what I'll get asked. Hopefully we'll stay on musical topics. But yes, Nikki is in there. Wonderful. So we've got a lot of the team in here already today. So today's going to be a Q&A session, and I think we've covered quite a lot today. Over the last couple of months, we talked about the piece Asturias by Isaac Albéniz. We talked about the Bach Chaconne, just a little small, light topic there. We did talk about a lot of musicality topics this season. We had sort of musicality and how it relates to harmony on the score. We broke down last week with a fun exploration of slowing and speeding up some video to get some funny sounds there in one of the performance videos. And we looked at what was going on if we really analyze in micro detail what's happening to be expressive. So if you have any questions about any of that, anything that you feel was left unanswered in your mind, or anything that you wanted to delve in a bit deeper, please do start asking some questions, and I will start giving some answers to the best of my ability. We also can field some other questions a bit more broader in musical scope. As some questions start to pile in, because I know you just have burning questions on the tip of your tongue, Gutoberfest is coming up, I think, just 10 days from now. Today is, October 13th. Hasn't this year been a blur? October 13th now, and it's going to be October 23rd, the first day of Gutoberfest. And that's going to be this whole Gutoberfest series. I see Linda in there, and who else was in the very first iteration? Anyway, it started 5 years ago. We had sessions in New York City, then it went online, and then went back to New York City. And now we're back online this year. We have 8 teachers and musicians sharing some inspiration over the weekend. We've got performances and workshops and masterclasses and warm-up seminars, and even just some socializing time where we have different opportunities to interact with the different people and ask questions in Zoom breakout rooms. So it's going to be great. Nikki Todesco is our events manager, and she is the one organizing all of this. And it's a pretty ambitious scope. It should cover a lot of time zones, which is great. So, people in the Australasia time zone region will get good access to the evening sessions. Those in Europe will get good access to the morning sessions. And of course, we're going to be putting up replays in the Academy as soon as we can get it there. We'll going to have a little bit of a breather, maybe a glass of wine or 10. And then we'll get some replays up in the Academy. And of course, this is all free to all the Academy members. It really is something we wanted to do for the Academy members. It's a treat. It's something to look forward to, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So we've got about 200 people that have registered so far, I believe, Dave, if that's correct, around that number. And then I also send out an email today where people from the public can also have access as a guest auditor if they would like to attend and join in the festivities. All right, so I'm going to start. People are smashing things all over the place in the comments. Yeah, Dave's saying it's very close to the 200 mark now. Should be great. It should be a real fun Zoom session. We expanded our ability to get out to 500 participants for this. So there'll be lots of little bricks, lots of Brady Bunch bricks to sift through. It'll be quite the experience. Gary Lee, who's in the chat, will be there. Christopher Mallet and Thomas Flippen from Duo Noir will be there. Sonia Plochel, James Erickson, Dave Belcher, Nikki Tedesco, and Richard Charlton from Australia, composer, a very good friend of mine from Australia. Looking forward to having him talk about composition. It's something that I think is an increasing interest of some members of the Academy, and he'll be talking about composition there. Alrighty, okay, I'm just scrolling back through some of the comments to see if there's any questions in there. Steve asked, pertaining to this, are there any more of these sessions after this one? It's been a fantastic series. Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate that you've enjoyed this. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. We're going to do this Thursday. We'll have an interview. I have someone in mind, but I haven't contacted them yet. At this point in the season, I'm flying by the seat of my pants with interviews, but I have someone in mind. Next Tuesday, we'll have our final teaching and learning session. Maybe if you have some suggestions of topics, I'd be happy to field those. Although I was going to touch on some practice tools. And then next Thursday, we'll have the wrap-up session. We'll have, I believe, Nikki, Dave, and James on the call, so we can give some feedback about exams at large. John asked, will coaching calls be taking place over Gutoberfest? No, the entire team is involved in Gutoberfest. I think there may have been some confusion about leaving signups there, so apologies if those signups were mistakenly there. We will not be doing coaching that weekend, but there'll be plenty of guitaring to be done. And then yes, Linda was one of the first, and I think that first Gutoberfest sort of kick-started the whole CGC experience. All right, now Stephen asked a question. Please compare and contrast the difference in rhythm between the waltz and mazurka as it applies to Maria Luisa. Great question. I don't want to say something incorrect. So we are going to Google together mazurka. Now mazurka is a Polish dance. It's, as described here, a lively Polish dance in triple time. I'm going to look for the rhythm, and then we might find a couple of examples. Waltzes are in 3/4 time, and you can find different examples of a waltz feel. And so I think the most common feel for a 3/4 waltz that's a nice one. Pa, pa. There's usually an accent on that first beat, and then you have a lighter second and third beat. It gives a nice lilting 1, 2, 3. And you have different styles of waltz. You've like the Viennese waltz. There's sort of different lift that you might find in like the waltzes by Johann Strauss Jr. From the Blue Danube. Different sort of feels to these waltzes. They're not always the same. Another example you might find in 3/4, which has a different feel, is the Bach Chaconne, which we found actually has a pulse on the second beat, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. So it has a different feel. So 3/4 as a time signature in itself doesn't always have that it doesn't always mean it's a waltz, basically. But we often, I think, associate the two. So let me read for you what I found here on the good old Wikipedia. The mazurka, a Polish dance, is a Polish folk dance in triple meter, usually at a lively tempo and with strong accents unsystematically placed on the second or third beat. Originally from the cultural region of Mazovia, it is one of the Poland's national dances. The mazurka, alongside the polka dance, became popular at the ballrooms of Europe in the 19th century, particularly through notable works by Frédéric Chopin. So yes, the Chopin, who's a Polish composer, wrote a lot of mazurkas. Let me see if some of these little examples come through. Doesn't seem particularly lively. And the rhythm that's displayed here, so that was a little mazurka by Chopin. And the rhythm that's displayed here is there's sort of an accent on the third beat, so with an accent on the third beat, I suppose 1, 2, 3, 3, 1. I don't remember it. Hang on, the brain can only cope with so much at the moment. My brain, that is. There it is. So that would actually make sense in terms of we've got this accented note that carries across with a sort of syncopated tie on the third beat, and then 3, 1. So accenting that 3 does make a lot of sense. 3, 3, 1. I think that's the feel that's outlined with that. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So that is going to be the best indication I would suggest is a lively 3/4 dance, and it's got that a little bit of a accent there on that third beat. So thank you, Stephen, for that question. This could be a real mixed bag. I don't know if I can answer all these questions. Okay, I'm just scrolling through. So Andrew asked, "Hi Simon, small but also possibly quite big question. What would you say is the distinction between an arrangement and transcription?" Oh man. Okay. Who would love to chime in and answer this is my very close friend, Janet Agostino. She's currently doing her PhD at New South Wales University on this very topic, and she would talk at length about this. Now, a transcription of a work often implies a pretty direct adaptation that doesn't necessarily have too many liberties taken. So transcriptions of lute music or might be probably one of the best examples, but an arrangement starts to bring in actually sort of a creative reimagination of pieces. So if you're going to try and arrange, like for instance, New World Symphony, is that the one? No, or Pictures at an Exhibition by Ravel Mussorgsky, that was done by the phenomenal Japanese guitarist Yamashita. Kazuko Yamashita. That is an arrangement. You're reimagining it. You're having to do quite a lot of creative aspects to arrange it. Likewise, so that's reducing it onto a small instrument. But if you expand it, you could take something small, like let's say Maria Luisa perhaps, and then expand it and arrange it for guitar quartet. You might add notes, you might share voices across different instruments. That's more of an arrangement, where it really is a reimagination of a piece to suit a different musical format, different instrumentation, etc. Whereas a transcription is usually much more literal, much more direct, and yeah. I think that's the answer. I'm happy, Dave, Nikki, if you want to chime in. I know Nikki, she's got a degree in musicology, so happy if you want to chime in. Linda was saying that she's danced. Linda over in Germany, she is a folk dancer as well, and she's danced mazurkas. And she's saying you can feel the accent on beat 2 as a dancer. Okay. So I think there might be some deeper research to be done there, Stephen, maybe about those mazurkas. Dynamics question. Alan Matthews, classical guitar shed, often recommends the opposite of the default advice for dynamics. Decrescendo when the pitch rises and crescendo when it goes up. It sounds like you might have to confirm something for me, because what I'm reading is decrescendo when the pitch rises, yep, and crescendo when it goes up. And when you say goes up, that also to me says rises. So maybe, Craig, could you confirm that? As a very general principle in music, if you have a rising scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you might crescendo through that. This is a very broad generalization. And then as you descend in a musical line, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you might do a decrescendo. It, very, very broad, but that would be just a sweeping generalization there about an approach to dynamics. I think you need to take a grain of salt with any kind of general association of, oh, I see a line going up, therefore it should get louder, because there's just so much nuance and creativity that can go into shaping and phrasing. And while it might be helpful early on to have those generalizations, I think very quickly we might want to move away from those and think and take each one in context as an independent musical idea. Yeah, Craig saying, without wanting to set you up for a fight with another online teacher. No fighting here. But I just want to clarify what if you could, I assume you meant getting louder going up and coming, decrescendo coming down. Is that correct? Yeah, so Craig is saying, should have been descending, decrescendo when the pitch rises, a crescendo when it comes down. Yeah, that is contrary to that sweeping generalization. Yep. I don't think that's what I saw him recently do this little video on Beethoven's Ode to Joy melody, and I do believe he actually was advocating getting louder as the melody rose and then decrescendo. So maybe just have a check there again, unless I obviously don't know all of his opinions. Oh, I've already hit the end of the questions. There must be some more questions. Yeah, Nikki's saying, you're right, when doing an arrangement, you want to transform the piece to make it suitable to the new instrument. There's much more to do in terms of creativity. Yeah. So, one thing we haven't gotten into too much at Classical Guitar Corner is the process of arrangement. And, one of the all-time masters of arranging for classical guitar is Roland Diens. And Roland Diens, has a great book of, I think it's called Mes Arrangements, my arrangements, I guess that translates to. And he's just such a master. He was, unfortunately, passed away a little while ago. He's such a master of using the resources of classical guitar to have a melody, accompaniment, and bass line all moving, all thorough, and making musical sense, yet it all fits under the fingerboard. He was a real master of that. Steve asked, as a professional, do you still find time to play just for sheer enjoyment? No outcomes, nothing to prepare for performance, CGC or otherwise, just to chill and enjoy? That's a great question, Steve. I would have to be very frank right now that especially in the last 6 months, I've found it very difficult to get in concerted practice time. I will say that when I have a project that I'm involved with, I, for instance, recorded, or not recorded, I did a video with Ben Verdery for one of his pieces that he composed. And we recorded that piece on an album quite a while ago. And he said, oh, let's make the video. And I had to sort of relearn that duet. And that gave me the impetus to practice that piece. So I find, and that's why I'm such a big advocate of having something to work towards, a goal, or something like exams or performance or what have you, because I find it really helps me to get back in the saddle, if you will. I will often, if I sometimes forget how calming and centering practice is for me. So sometimes when I feel really frazzled and I've got so many things on so many plates, I will actually try and remind myself to come to the guitar and just practice, just get in touch again with the sensation of touch and vibration of the instrument and playing, even just scales or just basic arpeggios. I find it very meditative and very centering. And honestly, these days I don't do it enough. The pandemic's been a really turbulent time for me in terms of playing the instrument. So I'm always grateful for any request to perform for something where I have to get my act together and focus. That usually works. But I would like to get a better work music balance than I have now, because I work at the moment with CGC and everything seems to sweep me away. Did that answer your question? Do you still find time to play for sheer enjoyment? Yeah, it's all over the map. But I would say in general, yes. I think I do enjoy preparing. I think if someone at this stage, sort of getting close to the 40s, is still playing music, they enjoy preparing for things. They enjoy collaborating with people. They enjoy projects, which is exactly what we do as professionals, just constant projects. And that is enjoyment for me. So I think, that, yeah, if that makes sense. Matthew says, totally different topic. How do you get over a musical rut? In your learning, for example, you're sick of the repertoire you're working on, asking for a friend. Yes, I do. I mean, there was a forum post recently that sort of talked about that. Stuck in a rut. So there's many things you can do, but in the end, it's that old Delphic oracle, know thyself. You are going to know what triggers you in terms of motivation, in terms of discipline and perseverance and all those sorts of things. So as I just mentioned, something that gets me out of a rut is when I have accountability. So someone asks me to do something, or I've declared I'm going to do something. A perfect example is these CGC shows. Now, I know Roger Ramirez is watching, and he's a fellow podcaster, and my podcasts for CGC have become a little bit erratic over the last years. But the CGC shows, as I noted to him at one point, have been very, very regular. And you know why? Because it's live, and you beautiful people are there watching and expecting me to be live at 4 p.m. on Tuesday and Thursday. And that has kept me accountable. Now, I set this up myself. I made this promise to you, and I think people would feel a bit jilted and let down if I didn't turn up at 4 p.m. So it's a good example of how you might need to set up things to get yourself out of the rut. There is no magic wand. I think you need to look at what actually motivates you. Hopefully, almost all of us, I think, are adults here, that we've probably learned what kind of things get us out of bed in the morning, if that makes sense. So I think collaborating with someone would be huge. We've got the November duet challenge coming up at CGC. Offering to play in the masterclass at Gutoberfest is an example. Committing publicly to learning a piece and performing it. Doing a grade exam. All of those things are quite helpful. Then, of course, there's just sort of things to shake it up a little bit. I personally am a creature of habit. So I will be in here on the computer all day and doing things, and then I will really, or Evita, my beautiful wife, will often say, hey, you haven't been outside today, you should go for your bike ride. And I bike up and down the Hudson River. And that changes my mindset. I know, Matthew, you might still be locked down in Victoria. I'm not sure. I hope that's going okay for you. But something that just shakes up your point of view, gets you out of your regular rhythm, if you're something like me and a bit of a creature of habit, that can help. So listening to other things. Evita and I think I mentioned on a previous show, we listened to the whole recording of Dark Side of the Moon, just listening with no visuals or nothing, just listening. That was a really great experience. Listening to a whole symphony of music or listen to piano pieces. Something that changes it up in a musical way as well might be a way to do it. Asked, does Classical Guitar Corner cover improvisation at all? That's something I'm very interested in. We do in a limited context. We have one of the theory components focuses on improvisation through the lens of theory, or vice versa, theory through the lens of improvisation. Because when you improvise, one way to improvise, there are many different approaches. One way is to think harmonically, think through triads and whatnot, passing tones, neighbor notes, etc. And that's what we do. We actually talk about triads, and then instead of mentally processing it all, we actually go through it through improvisation, because it's a different activation of that knowledge. So thinking about, if you've just got a 2-5-1. D minor, G major, C major, and I'm just improvising, but I'm thinking about the triads. And that's what that course teaches and talks about. Instead of noodling and letting the fingers move, which we often do, this kind of, I think a lot of people that come from electric guitar, rock, they find a pattern and their fingers are rather in control. But we talk about thinking of triads first. Then adding in things like passing tones and neighbor notes. So still based on those triads, and letting that, it's a different way of learning theory, and I quite like it. And it's been really fun. It's always very fun to hear people's improvisations in the grade exams based on that. All right. Jenny asked, is there any evidence that there are some people that just never get the hang of keeping in time? I have heard the term tone deaf, and I suppose by extension there might be people that, I've never heard the term rhythm deaf. It doesn't sound very nice. But I seriously doubt it. We were all born from mothers, and we're in that womb with the heartbeat. And that's the birth of rhythm for all of us. It's primal. And that rhythm happens when we walk. That rhythm happens when we talk. And I think there's a bit more abstraction to bring rhythm into the musical context, because we've got fine motor skills, we've got synchronization of fine motor skills, and we've got reading of a meta language, a foreign language with standard notation. So I think a lot of those things get in the way. I think the main thing, honestly, Jenny, and everyone else who might have some rhythm challenges, is that we are very rarely held accountable. So if you think about the grand span of time we spent playing music as classical guitarists, we are asked or checked or held accountable with our rhythmic playing such a small percentage in comparison to any person that grew up playing in a band, in a marching band, a jazz band, in orchestra, anything, in a community where clapping, like if you grew up with flamenco around you, palmas, it's much more present, and you spend so much more time with rhythmic activity. So I think that is the reason. It's not at all about some people just don't have that ability. It really is that it's about spending the amount of time. I am a big fan of, I personally have had a lot of rhythmic issues. I've never been the most rhythmic musician. One thing that really helped me, I used to live in Harlem, and I used to take long, long walks down the side of Central Park. I would walk at a regular gait because there's very few streets on the park side of that avenue. And I would walk, and I practice my rhythms as I was walking. So boom, boom, andante, right? Walking pace. And I'll go boom, da-um, boom, da-um. You can do cross rhythms, you do all sorts of things. Practice your triplets to duplets, dotted rhythms. I did it while walking, and that I found very liberating because it's away from the instrument, all those other challenges that come with it. And once you have a sense of rhythm in your ear, it's a bit like tuning. If a guitar's in or out of tune, after enough familiarity with it, you go, ooh, that's out of tune. Same thing happens with rhythm. I think people who spend a lot of time with rhythm, they hear sloppy rhythm and like, ooh, it's a bit off, you know? So it's really about getting accustomed, having that pattern recognition of what a rhythm should and does sound like as written on the page, and then translating it through your instrument. So that's my 2 cents there. Yeah, Jenny was saying, I think this might be referring back to something else we were talking about, but many people in academia are reporting that they are finding it very difficult to hold concentration for any significant period of time, unless they're forced to by having like a writing deadline. Yes, so that speaks to this idea of having accountability being very helpful, and sometimes we have to set that own accountability ourselves. But I think we're increasingly fighting against distractions in the modern world. Scott said, speaking of improvisation, what are some techniques for incorporating aspects of theory into improvisation? It seems like there's a huge gap between what I know and what I can apply on demand. What I would suggest, and this is this is going to be a nascent idea that I don't really have fully formed because I only heard it delivered once by... the name is dropping from my mind. It's a British gentleman. He teaches in Denver, used to teach in Boulder, Colorado. Wonderful academic, wonderful player. Someone can write it in the comments. Gosh, I can't remember his name for some reason. But this gentleman, it'll come up. Someone will hopefully write it at the moment. Jonathan Leithwood, that's it. The brain's a funny thing, how it trickles out information like that. Jonathan Leithwood has, and I think there might be a lecture somewhere online about this, but he talks about this idea of learning a piece through improvisation. And I think it's a fantastic concept. And I'm going to paraphrase, and there'll probably be some concepts that are not perfect in it, but it's got to do with, let's say you have a piece, right? Let's just take a piece of music. Got Maria Luisa open, that would be a good one, but let's no, Lagrima, you play too much. All right, let's say in this, right? This little lesson number 4 by Segreras, this little sort of tremolo prep piece, all right? So the piece is this. So we've gone from E minor to probably sort of a B7, 1 to 5, surprise, surprise. But the general idea, and you might want to have a Google of Jonathan Leithwood and this lecture concept, is we're going to play around with this. Same matter, same material, but what I'm doing is I'm playing around with it, and it's not random though. I'm going through here, E minor triad, E, G, and B. Then I went to the B7 chord, or maybe. And it does 2 things, I think. One is it solidifies your understanding of the piece and its structure and its harmony in a very different way, because it's not static. It's not one thing that you have to memorize in kind of a Victorian education type way. You're playing around with it. You're playing with silly putty and going, ooh, I see. It feels like it's like looking at something versus touching it and feeling the different edges and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing is it gives you a nice framework to improvise. So you're sort of half improvising, right? You're taking some guidelines from the music and then taking some liberties as well. And it's a lovely midpoint, because when someone says improvise, what are my guidelines? Anything you want, right? it's recipe for freezing because there's so much to choose from. But if someone says improvise, use the same kind of tremolo, same key, same harmonies, but just play around with the melody a little bit within the context of the harmony, that suddenly becomes more achievable. Likewise, if you wanted to take a different aspect and play around, let's go super simple now. Let's say, right. Let's say let's take a, what if we did this? I went slow and I put it from D major into D minor. And through that, you are improvising. It's not what's written, but you've got a lot of guidelines there helping you to be creative there. And you're also reinforcing your harmonic knowledge of how that piece is constructed. So I think it's a brilliant idea. Please do have a search for Jonathan Leithwood's lecture on the topic. It's a topic that he's, I think, lived with and thought about quite a lot. So he would be much more fluent in talking about it. Oh my gosh, it's 4:39 already? It's ridiculous. All right. Robert, what we receive... Oh. Okay. Sorry, I thought there was a question, but thank you, Robert. That's very nice of you to say. I should read the questions before clicking on them. But anyway, that was very lovely. Dan asked, what is the most important thing for you to do to prepare for a performance? How do you clear your mind so you can focus? Big question. I would suggest, Dan, that the number one thing that helps you prepare for a performance is being prepared with your practice. You know if things have been left up to chance, if there's a couple of measures you never really get right or not consistently, you know if you've practiced performing this in front of other people and you've done it 10 times, you feel confident, you know all that going into a performance. So the more prepared you are, the more confident you will feel, the more successful that performance will be. So that's the number one thing, is actual preparation of spending time, the right amount of time, the diligent practice. There's a difference between just playing through something and really working on it. Work on a piece may not be enjoyable. It may be exhausting. It might be repetitive, but that's the work as opposed to playing and noodling through it and just repeating things without any structure. In terms of, building up your acumen or ability with performing, I recommend practicing performing. So there's flight or fight responses that happen when we perform. Your heart rate increases. You might perspire more. You actually, your blood vessels may constrict and yet make your hands feel cold. All of these are physiological reactions to a perceived threat, which is the record button or an audience. And the more you acclimatize yourself to that experience, the easier that will become, and the less of a physiological reaction will come from your body. So those are the two main things: preparation as a whole, the work you've done leading up to it, and acclimatizing yourself, which you could almost interpret as another type of preparation, really. So Brooke asked, how do I get that thumb and low E to really come out and resonate? Is it all nail? So let me see. Ta-da! No, it's not all nail. It's really about, I would suggest, what's nice to do with the right hand or things in the right hand in general is to benchmark, right? And to benchmark, what I mean by that is if you do a rest stroke and really you push in the thumb and take the tension up and then release it going into the next string. So you see my wrist is actually quite adjusted. So I'm really pushing into the face of the guitar, or even with flesh. That's probably going to be your biggest, roundest sound. Find the limit where the guitar starts to buzz and distort a little bit. All right, and that's probably going to be and then you want to try and match that sound maybe with a free stroke that isn't such an extreme change of technique. Maybe it could be a rest stroke. Another thing that's going to play into this is the balance in the hand. A lot of the time, that's the challenge is, let's say you play, right, a chord. If you want to be bass heavy, the challenge here is to develop the ability to be light here. So, very hard not to do this. We talk about that quite a bit at CGC. We talk about it in the context of right hand balance. And that is the challenge there, to develop that. So one aspect is about finding that benchmark. I would start with rest strokes, really finding where the volume capacities of the instrument, and then talking about right hand balance. That's an interesting question, Martin. Hello. Hey do. What instruments are easy to play together with guitar without amplification? Recorder, violin, flute, other guitars, mandolin, anything sort of wooden with vibration, acoustic, small wooden acoustic vibration should work. Maybe even viola. Cello starts to get a bit borderline. You know, a really interesting one, double bass and tuba operate in a very different tonal registry. And so they actually make very good pairings. I played with a double bass player once, and he said, oh my, thank heavens I don't have to push so much, because normally they're playing with piano players, and it's just very strange. If you've ever been to a nightclub, because we're all ravers here, right? You go to a nightclub, it's very heavy bass, doof, doof, doof. It's funny, you can actually hear each other talk still, as long as it's very bass heavy. But if there's a lot of treble and mids to the music, it's very hard to hear each other speak. So they operate in different worlds. And so double bass actually is an interesting one. Cello starts to cover the same range as the guitar, the sort of vocal range, if you will. So that makes it a little harder to differentiate. But yeah, flute, shakuhachi, koto, mandolin, voice is a huge one. Violin, mandolin, whatever it was. You know, those are the kind of instruments I would suggest. And percussion can work quite well as well. Yeah. Just checking through some other questions. Okay, so I think, is this Christoph, the name? Hello, Simon. Hello. Would you recommend learning a piece to work out all the right-hand fingerings and have those firmly set, or is it okay to leave some fingerings improvised as you learn the piece? Interesting question. So in the early stages of learning, we dictate a lot of the right-hand fingerings. Not always, but we often do dictate those fingerings. What we're trying to instill is good habits, or at least the feeling of what we suggest is a good, appropriate right-hand fingering. And over time, we would hope as teachers that we've guided the students in such a way that their decisions that they make are informed by that sensibility later on. So you'll find right-hand fingering becomes less and less specific as you get from very beginner material through to advanced material. And sometimes when you're playing an advanced piece, arranged or edited by a master player like David Russell, Manuel Barrueco, what you're often paying for or looking for in those editions is their specific problem solving of a particular passage with a fingering, left and right hand, etc. I will say as well that the pitfall with putting in very specific right hand fingering is, although it can work to great advantage because you've figured it out, if you really hammer it in, you're going to be very inflexible should you come across a better option later on. And that's part of the work we talk about with when learning a piece, is having that patience to sit back and maybe discuss it with a teacher or explore different options with the right hand, because the first option you come across is not necessarily the best. And you don't want to hammer in. People often try to memorize very early in the process, and they're hammering in these things, which is fine, but then a year later they come across an edition or have a lesson or something, and they find another way of doing things about, ooh, I like that better, but it's really hard to change over if you've memorized through repetition. So I would recommend in the early stages of learning to trust your teacher or your additions or your methods that you're working from. And then I would be flexible for quite some time when learning a piece of music until you really feel very confident that you've come across a good and practical right hand fingering. Another thing about fingerings is that they can work in a vacuum, when there's no nerves and things, but then in a performance setting, they might come undone. Sometimes I know I've come up with very intricate fingerings in the right hand that work. It's a beautiful, elegant solution, right? But they don't work in performance because you're stressed, and actually you just want the simplest solution. So all those kind of things, you live with these pieces for such long periods of time, and they become evident. Insidia, have you ever tried to play electric guitar? Have I ever? Electric guitar is great. I still have my Ibanez in the cupboard. I haven't played it for quite some time, but I started on electric guitar. The very first piece I ever performed was an instrumental version, one guitar, of Stairway to Heaven. How appropriate. Electric guitar is great, and man, isn't it nice to have sustain and volume and just dialing up a little knob there. James Erickson is a phenomenal electric guitar player. But yes, love electric guitar. John's asking, is ukulele easier than guitar or just different? I would posit that the left hand is easier in terms of stretch. However, I think almost every instrument, every instrument has its challenges. The ease that comes with stretches might then present a challenge of a dexterity when you get virtuosic. And I do think there are some instruments that are easier to start. So ukulele, I think, is very easy to start, as is some styles of guitar, to be honest. Whereas something like violin or clarinet, it's harder to start, harder to get a nice sound. We have to wait quite a lot longer. Oh, I see people are still commenting about practicing rhythm while walking, so I must be, a little ways away from where we are up to. Okay, Linda has a question related to Christoph's question. Learning right-hand fingerings, have you ever played through whole pieces on open strings just playing the right-hand fingerings? So this is an approach that I've heard of. Manuel Barrueco reportedly does either for all his pieces or for a number of pieces, like entire concertos, just right hand alone. I have done it, yes. Not for many pieces though, because it's quite an arduous process. I think you could do it for smaller pieces pretty readily, but one of the ones I did it for was the Allegro from Prelude, Fugue, and Allegro, because I was struggling to really do it well. Now that the Cathedral, I think, was another one I did the third movement like that. Often it was with pieces that it had enough virtuosity to warrant attention on the right hand alone. I haven't done it too many pieces, but there are. I think it's a worthwhile approach. But yes, Linda mentioned it. She uses it just for methods of practice for certain difficult measures of a piece, never for a whole piece. I would agree. That's how I use it most of the time. Yes. Oh wow, Dave's found the link for Jonathan's video. Fantastic. Thank you. Jenny asked, any suggestions for a reasonably good quality mic to buy to record with my iMac? Yeah, I mean, the Zoom H4 and H6, I would highly recommend in general, maybe even the H2. The numbers are just about the inputs. Those are really great. I think the Audio-Technica AT2020 that has a USB input could be very good because it plugs straight into the computer instead of needing a preamp. Right here, because this is just the old Shure SM88. You can hammer nails with these things. They're the ones the MCs would have on a stage, or what have you. But any kind of microphone that's external will up the sound game dramatically. A number of those USB mics that you can plug in, I think, would be a great addition. But yeah, check out the Audio-Technica AT2020. That's what I might suggest. Oh, cool. Scott saying he just was learning that that piece we were talking about. Oh, wow. Greetings from Oman. Nice to have you with us. Oh, this is a very common technique that people want to know about. Tips about tremolo technique. Gohar Vardanyan, who is very good at tremolo technique, did a whole course on Recuerdos de la Alhambra, and she teaches tremolo technique quite a lot. See if I can give the highlights, because we could do a whole episode on tremolo technique. In my opinion, tremolo technique is a result of a very well-rounded right-hand technique overall. You need to have good, consistent tones, matched tones, consistent tones between the fingers. You need to have a good hand position, a good wrist position. And I will say, you need to have your fingernail shape and length really figured out in your right hand. That sometimes takes years to get all of those little micro adjustments figured out. And I will say, in my opinion, that some people's hands are more conducive to an even tremolo than others. So I would suggest just working on your free stroke technique, really refining the shape of your nails. And one of my favorite approaches to tremolo is considering it that is an arpeggio on one string. So if you can work on arpeggios, and work on that in terms of consistency and accuracy and fluidity, and then start moving them onto single strings with the same kind of movements, then there's a lot of work that can be done there. Thoughts on Eddie Van Halen? When I was growing up, as I mentioned, I played electric guitar. I had a few guitar heroes. Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, Eddie Van Halen, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai. And then I was huge. I listened to a lot of Jimi Hendrix, a lot of Led Zeppelin. So Eddie Van Halen, I always was drawn to instrumental electric guitar. And so he's obviously with Eruption and all the solos and things. I learned a lot of the solos with the tapping, and just a virtuosic musician with a joie de vivre. And he also, he actually had quite a connection with classical music. There's quotes from the Kreutzer Sonata in Eruption, and I believe he had tattoos of Beethoven and Chopin, maybe? Anyway, there was a shared love there, I think, and appreciation of classical music. So, huge respect, and what a great loss. What a huge loss. Do I still play the mandolin once in a while? I just listened to my band's recording biking the other day, and I missed it, so I haven't played the mandolin for a little while, but I need to get some free time and get back into it. I haven't. I would say we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and I would say early music is one of my weaknesses. I've put my hands on a lute and played it, and I've played a period guitar, but it's probably something I need to explore more in my life. Vihuela, lute, theorbo, 19th century period instruments. There's a lot there to explore, but and I really do enjoy listening to them too. And then this might be the last question of the day. Thank you, Cynthia. Any tips on playing without looking at your hands? So proprioception, the ability to perceive our body in space, and kinesthetic memory are really very, very powerful. There's so many things that we do on a day-to-day basis, turning taps on, opening doors, scratching our ear, whatever. There's all these things that we do. We're very accurate with our movements, and we've developed that through familiarity over time. In the early stages of guitar, we're often craning our neck, trying to look at fingers. I think one of the most liberating things is just to force yourself to do certain things on the guitar. Often with the right hand, it's about making sure we get the right string. But you could even just, if you put your right hand on a string and just move around the other strings, even jumping. You might hit other strings, that's fine. But you will probably find that you're more accurate than you think. Similarly with the left hand, doing shifts, aiming for certain frets, there are definitely going to be some times when you need to look where you're going. But if it's 2 frets, there's a lot that you probably already absorbed. So, just looking away, playing in the dark, playing blindfolded, maybe that's a little too extreme, but I would say just explore what your body already knows, and it can be quite enlightening. It develops over time, so don't feel that there's any huge rush, but I think explore looking away and feeling, and in that process you can double down on this and see what it feels like to relax your neck muscles and lower your shoulders as you're playing. And looking up, we so often look down, kind of like phones and things. I'm I'd be hypocritical if I said I wasn't one of the worst at that. But anyway, just looking up and opening up the chest as you play can be a really positive thing, and that obviously can be doubled up with not looking at your hands. So, Randy, tips for memorization. Maybe next week we'll have. Please ask me that question again. I might have to wrap it up. It's 4:59. How's that for timing? Thanks everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the CGC team for tuning in and answering questions, and I really appreciate that too. It's always great. 3 more to go, and then Gutoberfest. If you're on the email list, please do check your email that went out a little earlier about Gutoberfest. Remember, all the people in the Academy, this is free and open to you. Please do sign up for a masterclass. We're having people from grades 1 through 100 can feel free to partake in those masterclasses. These teachers are here for you, to help you, to inspire you, and take that leap. Find a reason to practice and something to work towards. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.